A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. We're going to be talking with Larry Keane from the National Shooting Sports Foundation here in just a moment or two. Alabama Governor Kay Ivey signing the Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act into law this week. There are now more than a dozen states around the country that have prohibited the use of these merchant category codes that were first developed a couple of years ago. Specifically now, actually, I take that back. The merchant category codes have been around for a while. A specific merchant category code for gun stores, however, is a fairly recent development, and it was put in place thanks to the hard work of anti-gun activists and anti-Second Amendment politicians like Elizabeth Warren. But if you've been following along, you know that the major credit card companies announced a pause in implementing these codes last year. Since then, we've had a couple of states that have tried to mandate the use of these codes. We've had a far larger number step up to prohibit the use of these codes. And that's where we get started with our conversation with Larry Keane from the National Shooting Sports Foundation. Take a look and a listen. Larry, thanks so much for coming on the program today. It's good to see you.
It's always a pleasure to spend time with you, Cam.
And congratulations on the Yankees position atop the AL East leaderboard. We shall not mention where the Red Sox are at the moment, but hey, you know what? It's still early in the season. That's the only thing I'm saying.
May, it's still May. Plenty of time for the wheels to come off the bus.
That's right. And speaking of wheels coming off the bus, the gun control activists a couple of years ago tried to get Amalgamated Bank was the organization that was really pushing these merchant category codes for gun stores. After that deal was announced, we saw the major credit card companies first say, okay, fine, we'll try to comply with this. We don't really see a need for this, but we'll do it. And then they all hit the pause button. I think it was last March. They said, we're not going to move forward with this. Since then, you've had states like California that passed legislation mandating the use of these codes, but we've also had more than a dozen states around the country adopt legislation prohibiting the use of these codes. And the most recent state, right, is Alabama, where Governor Kay Ivey just signed the, what is this? The Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act into law.
Right. So Colorado joined California in mandating the use of the code, but Governor Ivey signed the bill, and that made Alabama, I believe it's the 15th state to pass the Second Amendment Privacy Act. And we expect and are hopeful that that bill will pass in Louisiana and be signed by Governor Landry. So that would bring us to 16. And there's, of course, federal legislation with the same name been introduced in the House by Congresswoman Elise Stefanik and in the Senate as well. So we're hopeful of trying to build co-sponsorship for those two bills. But yes, this is a push by the gun control community. It started with the New York Times anti-gun opinion writer Andrew Ross Sorkin after Parkland, and he's on one of the talking heads on CNBC, the sort of news, the business news channel, and then Amalgamated, which is the bank of the DNC. They bank a lot of anti-gun, campaigns, the DNC and such, Biden's campaign, very, very self-professed progressive bank. So they submitted this proposal to require, as part of the international standards that the payment networks, Visa, MasterCard, American Express, et cetera, operate under, that would require a specific code for firearms retailers. This was supposedly to help prevent mass shootings, that somehow banks would be able to identify, mass murderers using credit cards to buy firearms and ammunition, and then could file with the Treasury Department what are called suspicious activity reports, which the law already requires banks to file. And so it had been submitted a number of times by Amalgamated, rejected by ISO, is not necessary. What I have learned is that ISO contacted Amalgamated and said, resubmit. And they did. And then it again was not supported at the committee level that does the sets the standards for that that industry, and then was immediately appealed to the ISO headquarters in Geneva. And then the decision not to go forward with it was reversed, and that's how the standard was adopted. All pushed also by anti-gun politicians, Elizabeth Warren and others, by state AGs and politicians, including Letitia James and others. So we've been urging Congress and the House Financial Services Committee to investigate what appears to us to be a manipulation of the ISO process by Amalgamated or those within ISO, particularly in Geneva, to advance this. But and the credit card processors did say they would implement it because they live under these standards. But when they realized what this really meant, and they admitted both publicly and in conversations with us that the code doesn't do what the gun control groups think it does.
Right.
It just tells you at most where the transaction is taking place. It tells you nothing about what is in the basket at checkout, right? You don't know whether it's waiters for duck hunting, decoys, gun cleaning supplies, a safe, or gun security devices, or whether it's firearms and ammunition. It tells you nothing.
Yeah, how much, the total price, where that money was spent, right. and that's it, right? Which again gets back to the idea that this is supposedly going to be able to identify mass shooters before they carry out an attack. And
exactly.
I talked with George Brockler recently. He's a former DA out in Colorado. He prosecuted the Aurora Theater killer, worked on the Columbine prosecutions. He's dealt with a number of mass shooters, and he had a great column just laying out the problems with this, and how a merchant category code would not have been able to identify the purchases that were made, how these committed killers can easily avoid detection. They can space out their purchases. They can pay cash. They can, again, there are ways to avoid this.
Right. I mean, it would not tell you anything. It doesn't, it tells you where, it doesn't tell you what, right?
Yeah.
So it's always been our view that the code was step one. And in fact, it's been admitted to by the gun control groups that it's step one, right?
Right.
Step two is now we need to know what's in the basket at checkout, right?
Yeah.
And so you ought to worry about what's in your wallet, not who's in your wallet. And so
right.
you can use to say, no, that's the wrong kind of gun. That's too many guns. That's too much ammunition. That's the wrong kind of ammunition, and deny transactions, right? And then file very dubious, suspicious activity reports about the lawful exercise of a constitutional right. Imagine banks monitoring what books or movies or magazines that you purchased and stopping a transaction because that's we don't like that view, that political view.
Right.
We don't like that speech. No one would stand for that in the First Amendment context. And as the Supreme Court famously said, Justice Thomas, the Second Amendment is not a second-class right. So we're glad to see that it hasn't been implemented. The problem, of course, is while we have 15 and hopefully 16 states that have already stopped it, I'm sure we'll see other states like New York, New Jersey, follow California's lead as they often do, Colorado, and try to enact mandates, which creates real problems for the credit card processors because now they have to have two systems if it's mandated. So we really need a federal solution. We need Congress to say, no, you're not doing this. But the anti-gun Democrats are pushing the banking regulators to force the use of the code by the payment processors. We don't believe they have any statutory authority to do that. But we really need, all your listeners should reach out to their member of Congress, to their senators, and demand that they support the Second Amendment Privacy Act to stop this inappropriate use of these codes to suppress the Second Amendment rights.
Absolutely. And we don't need to wait for step two. I mean, step one is problematic enough. One of the things that Brockler raised was, the potential for over-reporting.
Exactly.
If you are a financial institution and you are tasked with reporting suspicious activity and there's no real way to identify whether this activity is suspicious or not, well, what are you going to do? You're going to err on the side of reporting, right? You're going to cover your ass.
Of course.
And that means that there are going to be an awful lot of gun owners who are subject to these false flags or subject to investigation for making a purchase that has, no ill intent whatsoever. Brockler's also concerned that a lot of the smaller gun shops are simply going to be shut out by the major credit card companies. It might be one thing to work with a big box retailer or something like that, but these smaller independent stores could see themselves shut off of credit access completely. Are you concerned about that as well, Larry?
We're already concerned about it. We see discrimination on a regular basis in the financial services industry against our members, law-abiding, federally licensed retailers, where they can't get loans from banks, they can't use payment processors like Square and PayPal. They can't use Facebook. Banks cut them off, because they're quote unquote high risk, simply because they're in the firearms industry. We see this increasingly with insurance companies, simply will not write policy for anybody in the industry. And not like, commercial general liability, product liability claims, workers' comp, cybersecurity, auto policies. Nope. We don't touch your industry. So, we have to working to address that. I mean, that's why we have the FIND Act and other bills that we're working in Congress as well to try to push back on that really reprehensible discrimination against a law-abiding industry, particularly one that makes the exercise of the Second Amendment right possible. But I'll tell you the other thing, you're completely right, as is the prosecutor. You're going to end up with all of these suspicious activity reports, and then law enforcement's going to waste their time knocking on law-abiding gun owners to ask them, what did you buy this weekend? Why did you buy that gun this weekend? Why did you buy, quote unquote, so much ammunition? And there is no algorithm that they could apply to say, well, that's a suspicious activity, right? Like, well, that person, they buy ammunition every Saturday because they go to the range every Saturday. Why do they need 500 rounds of 22 ammunition? Because that's what they do on Saturday. So yeah, and it's going to distract law enforcement. And you're exactly right. The banks will cover their bacon by filing, because they could potentially get in trouble with the regulators if they don't. So it's very problematic. And step two is absolutely coming, right? That's the end game.
Yeah.
And I joked with somebody the other day when Colorado passed. I'm like, I'll give 20 bucks to the first person who sends a picture of a dealer with a sign in the window that says cash or check, no credit cards accepted, right? Because that's going to happen. Consumers are going to say, okay, if that's the deal, I'm not using my credit card. I don't want the government knowing what I'm buying. And didn't we just recently see that, right, with the Treasury Department and the Financial Crime Enforcement Network working with the banks, give us information about who bought guns on and around January 6th with no probable cause, no suspicion, just give us all the people who bought guns, and then looking to see, well, what did they say about God? What did they say about the election? And creating a list of, potential, terrorist or potential insurrectionists. It's just outrageous.
It is.
Outrageous.
It absolutely is. Again, I'm glad to see that we've got 15 states, hopefully 16, that are pushing back on this. And I'm also glad to see that you're working on a federal answer to this as well. But of course, the problem with Congress right now is that it's largely gridlocked, right? So even if the votes were there in the House, they're not there in the Senate, which brings us to this fall's election. This is something else that NSSF is working on, getting a Congress that actually will respect and protect our right to keep and bear arms.
Yeah, I mean, I probably say it every election, but it is true every time, and it's certainly true this November. This is the most important election for the future of the Second Amendment in this country, and I honestly deeply believe that. We have a Biden administration that is a whole of government attack on the firearms industry, trying to suppress our rights, suppress our ability to make and sell firearms to law-abiding Americans. So, everyone needs to be registered to vote, and we're launching our gun vote initiative very soon to try to get all gun owners registered. And then we've launched a super PAC called Protect Liberty PAC, PAC, protectlibertypac.com, and to try to raise funds so that we can run political campaign ads, in as many key races as possible to make sure that, the pro-gun majority continues to control the House, and that we get a pro-gun majority in control of the Senate. The Republicans only need to flip 2 seats to take control of the chamber. And West Virginia seems very likely, and frankly, the results in the Maryland Democratic primary, I think, bode well for former Governor Hogan in that race as the Republican. But there are a lot of, a third of the Senate is up, and there are a lot of vulnerable Democrats. And I don't mean to sound overtly partisan, but the reality is the Democrat Party at the national level is anti-gun, and generally speaking, the Republican Party at the national level is pro-gun. So that's sort of just code for anti-gun and pro-gun. But anything your audience can do to help support this initiative, protectlibertypac.com, would be greatly appreciated. We will use those funds to support the effort to protect the Second Amendment. And, no amount is too small. $1, $5, $17.76, $20.24, $47 for the next president. Whatever, you can chip in. I mean, if you're not supporting, other Second Amendment groups because of, the situation, ongoing situation, and you're not comfortable, well, this is someplace you can help support. It will be used exclusively for those purposes. There's no one's getting an Armani suit from Rodeo Drive with any contribution you give. So it's 100% goes to the effort. So protectlibertypac.com. Please do whatever you can to support the effort. So important.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Larry, I know we're going to be talking again very soon. There's so much stuff going on. Who knows? By this time next week, we could hear that the Supreme Court has agreed to hear a challenge to a so-called assaultants ban. We've got the export rules that I still want to talk with you about at some point. But I do appreciate you joining us on the program today, and I'm looking forward to the very next conversation.
Always great to spend time with you. And my understanding is that the Congressional Review Act resolution on the engage in the business rule is probably going to be filed today. And my understanding is there will be quite a number of co-sponsors, original co-sponsors, which is great to see, because that rule, we think is unconstitutional and really just the Biden administration effort to impose universal background checks, or as near to it as they can get. And they are just ignoring what the statute says to advance that anti-gun political agenda. So,
do you know how quickly that might go to a vote if it's being introduced today?
That's the problem. Who controls the Senate floor?
Right.
There'll be one in the House as well. I suspect that will be dropped very soon as well. The rule is officially gone from the administration to Congress. It's been quote unquote received, so that allows the resolution to be filed. It could go to the floor in the House whenever Speaker Johnson really wants to, but then in the Senate, it's a little more difficult since Chuck Schumer controls the agenda and the floor schedule. But it'll be interesting to see what folks like Senator Tester in Montana do, and others, right? Sinema, although she's not running, King in Maine. What does Sherrod Brown do? What does Senator Casey do in Pennsylvania? And how that might impact their race, because it's really lawless. This rule is just lawless.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And just getting back to something you said a couple of minutes ago, I'm pretty sure you feel the same way. You can tell me if you disagree, but listen, I would love if this issue if we were trying to pick between two good pro-Second Amendment candidates, a Republican and a Democrat. Yeah. I think one of the things that we need to be doing as a Second Amendment community is trying to rebuild the pro-Second Amendment Democrats rather than cede that ground to them. But you're right. For right now, look, there are no A-rated Democrats in Congress. There used to be, I think, 25% of the Democratic caucus 10 years ago was A-rated by the NRA. Zero Democratic politicians rated A by the NRA these days. And so that is the reality that we face. But this is also one of those issues where you could see some Democrats cross over, right? Testers, who is up for re-election, may want to show that, I support gun owners. Joe Manchin, who's not up for re-election, is somebody who could cross over. So I'm curious to see, and it does take a bare minimum, right? It's just a simple majority.
You don't need 60, right? You just need 51. So yeah, I think it is possible. So I think it's very eminently doable in the House, and if you can get 51 in the Senate, you could pull this rule down. Plus, there's litigation pending already. And a bunch of cases have been filed, 3 at least, with different AGs and a bunch of them. And so I think it's also possible that a court could issue a preliminary injunction in the near future with the rule, because, again, it's just the latest example of ATF exceeding its statutory authority. And as we've seen, like with pistol braces and bump stocks and the framer receiver rule, they're creating criminal law, and the Constitution does not allow the administrative state to enact criminal statutes or criminal law. That is the sole prerogative of Congress. And all that changed in the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was with respect to dealers, is it didn't have to be done for livelihood, is predominantly done for profit, but all of the other requirements, that it's repetitive, it's ongoing, it's systematic, it's course of conduct or business, all still pertain. And the occasional sale by a gun owner, or a collector, even if it's to make money, does not constitute someone engaged in the business as a dealer. It just simply doesn't. So, the Biden administration is, I think, just pandering to the gun control base, in advance of the election, say, look what I did, look what I did. I vote for me. So,
yeah, and I'm concerned that this isn't the last bit of pandering we're going to see between now and November. But again, we'll save that for the next conversation as well. We'll leave it here. Larry Keane with the National Shooting Sports Foundation. Thank you again for carving out a few minutes of your day, and I look forward to doing this again very soon.
Happy to do it, and thanks for having us. And again, protectlibertypac.com. Please, anything you can do, $5, $10, $20, it all helps the cause. Appreciate it. Great to see you.
Thanks, Larry.
Go Yankees.
My thanks once again to Larry for joining us on the program. And no, I will not be saying go Yanks. All right. I guess I just did, but I don't mean it. And that's the important thing. All right, before we get to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report, let's talk about this for just 1 second. At the very heart of our democracy lies the principle that we hold sacred, free speech. It's the cornerstone that supports every freedom we cherish. Yet in today's digital age, discussions about our wealth, our rights, and our future are being silenced or overshadowed by mainstream narratives, leaving many feeling voiceless in conversations that are crucial to our financial independence and security. This is where Wealth Protection Research steps in, armed with a mission that's never been more critical. Wealth Protection Research is not a financial advisory firm. They're defenders of free speech, committed to giving a voice to the silenced. Wealth Protection Research tirelessly seeks out financial experts. These are the voices that challenge prevailing narratives, especially as we navigate the uncertainties of the 2024 election. Wealth Protection Research has created a 2024 Election Wealth Protection Report. This free report highlights the 3 best ideas for protecting and growing your money heading into the 2024 election. It contains ideas the mainstream media won't touch, and listeners can get a copy completely free by texting IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. If you believe in the sanctity of free speech and the importance of financial freedom, then act now. Text the word IDEAS, IDEAS, to 76626 to claim your free copy of this 2024 Election Protection Report. It's time to widen the scope of what we're told, to hear the ideas the establishment doesn't think you can handle, and to take control of our financial destinies. Text IDEAS to 76626 to claim your free copy. All right, now let's turn our attention to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We'll start there with a case out of St. Paul. Now, this does not involve a violent criminal, but it is still, it's infuriating. Listen, we see plea deals given to violent offenders on a daily basis, but it doesn't stop there. I mean, our criminal justice system is basically reliant on plea deals. About 97% of cases in this country are resolved through a plea bargain. And the people who really benefit the most from that are career criminals, those with a lengthy criminal history who get in this rinse and repeat cycle where they get caught, they get arrested, they get charged, they get a plea deal, they're spit back out on the street. Maybe they're, caught again before their first case even goes to trial. But rarely are there serious consequences for these prolific offenders. And this is what happened in St. Paul, where a copper wire thief received probation for their latest theft. And yes, the key word there is latest. E. Zong, 47 years of age, St. Paul man with a record of stealing copper wire from streetlights, according to the St. Paul Pioneer Press, has avoided prison time for an incident back in January in St. Paul's Frogtown neighborhood. Zong pleaded guilty to felony possession of burglary or theft tools after reaching an agreement with Ramsey County prosecutors last month. The judge in this case followed the prosecutor's agreement on May the 3rd, staying a 13-month prison sentence for 3 years, during which time Zong will be on supervised probation. He was ordered to pay the city of St. Paul $548 in restitution. He was arrested back on January 18th after police were called out to the 800 block of Sherburne Avenue on a report of people stealing wire from a streetlight. Officers saw a man riding a bike, tried to stop and question him, but he pedaled down an alleyway. Bicyclist crashed, later identified as Zong. He said he fled because he was wanted on a Ramsey County felony warrant for theft. How about that? In Zong's backpack were wires, copper, a wire cutter, screwdriver, and saw blade. He said he had found the wires, and he uses the tools to fix his bike. Officials located 5 damaged light posts in the area. And as the St. Paul Pioneer Press reports, at the time of his arrest, Zong had 2 open cases, meaning they had not yet gone to trial, involving theft of wires from St. Paul streetlights. Those have since been resolved, according to the St. Paul Pioneer Press. They didn't say how those cases have been resolved, but I'm guessing they too involve Zong walking away with probation for what is a nonviolent felony offense here in St. Paul, Minnesota. Now, again, we've seen over the past couple of years, thanks to Bidenomics, a rise in incidents like this. Violent crime appears to be trending down in a lot of U.S. cities, which is fantastic. Not supposed to happen, according to the gun control activists, by the way, because of all of the availability of guns over the past couple of years. But nonviolent property crimes are still climbing in a lot of cities. And, everything from catalytic converters to, again, copper wire. Streetlights is unusual. I haven't heard a lot of cases about this, but apparently it's more common than I realize, in part perhaps because the punishments are so few and far between. All right, today's armed citizen story. We've got 2 for you. We've got an update on yesterday's armed citizen story, and then we've got another incident to report on. So yesterday we talked about a burglary that had been interrupted by a homeowner in St. Louis County early on Tuesday morning. We didn't have a lot of details in that case. We now are starting to learn a little bit more about the suspect in this incident. 27-year-old Andre Farrar III has been charged by the St. Louis County Prosecuting Attorney's Office with first-degree burglary, first-degree attempted burglary, as well as resisting arrest with a felony. He's been held on a $200,000 cash-only bond. It was just before 4 o'clock in the morning when officers were called out to a home on Empress Drive in St. Louis County on reports of a burglary. According to police, Farrar had unlawfully entered the home, had tried to steal property by pitching it out the window, but at some point he was shot by the homeowner. A man and a woman who live in the home were inside at the time. The suspect then ran from the home, past responding officers who had ordered him to stop and were telling him that he was under arrest. He took off into the woods. Police canine was used to search the area. He was taken into custody not long afterwards, taken to a hospital, listed in critical condition at last report after being shot. Residents of the home taken to the police station to speak with officers, but at this point, again, they're not facing any charges, and I don't think it is likely that they will. Farrar, according to police, by the way, has prior convictions out of St. Louis for burglary. Yeah, so once again, talking about a repeat offender, this time one who ran into an armed citizen. Now, today, we also have this report out of Dallas, Texas, where a burglary suspect was shot early Wednesday morning while trying to break into a home. It was just about 4:30 in the morning in an area of Dallas near the town of Duncanville. Police at the scene said there were people inside the home at the time when someone broke in, and one of the residents shot the burglary suspect, who was taken to a local hospital. At last report, listed in surgery as of Wednesday morning. No reported injuries, thankfully, to anybody inside the home at the time. And again, we don't have a lot of details here, but hopefully more information will become available. But at this point, again, looks like a clear-cut case of self-defense. You're in your home. Somebody who's not supposed to be there comes in the middle of the night. They're not there to deliver Girl Scout cookies. You have a justifiable fear of death or great bodily injury in those moments. Finally today, our good deed of the day, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. This is a great story out of the Washington Post, believe it or not. It feels weird even saying that come out of my mouth. Just, great story, Washington Post. Those two things don't usually go together, but a good human interest story by Kathy Free out of the town of Calhoun, Missouri, which reminds me a lot of my own town. It's about 500 people, very small, pretty close-knit community. But like a lot of rural locations, it is a constant struggle to find the funds to keep even basic services going. That is the case with the fire department there in Calhoun, Missouri. Mark Harden runs the fire department there. And as Kathy Free writes, his heart sank last month when he looked at the bank account balance for the volunteer fire department. It was $169. That's it. He said it was pretty discouraging. We've already been paying for stuff out of our own pockets to keep things going. He said, I probably shouldn't say how much of our money we've spent. My wife would divorce me. Well, the good news is that Harden and the other volunteer firefighters, who now number 28 in the town of about 500 people, have a little bit of money coming in, thanks to one local resident, a 91-year-old man who gave a $500,000 check to the Calhoun Volunteer Fire Department. This is amazing. Sam Sloan lives in Henry County, 2 miles up the road from the fire department. Harden said that he had never met Mr. Sloan, but he called him up one day and invited him to breakfast. He said he wanted to ask me a bunch of questions about the fire department. They had that initial meeting. Then Sloan said the next week, hey, man, why don't you join me for breakfast again? And then the week after that, he said, why don't you come by the house? So Harden said, I walked in the front door and Sam said, what do you think about this? He was holding out a check made out to the Calhoun Volunteer Fire Department for $500,000. What do you think about this? Harden said, I've never seen a check with so many zeros. I was at a loss for words. Now, Sloan didn't know that there was less than $200 in the volunteer fire department's bank account, but he did know that the department had been struggling to pay the bills, to upgrade equipment. He said that he told Harden that he had made a good living in the cattle and seed processing business, and that he decided years ago that once he retired, sold off his farmland and business, that he would make a substantial donation to the fire department. He said he and his wife, Jan, have a, quote, comfortable, simple life. They're satisfied with their ranch house and 60 acres. They have a son who will inherit their estate. He says, when I went out on my own, he says, I was pretty big in the cattle business. I had a couple thousand head of cows. He said, I was never one to go around bragging about my money. Nobody knew how much I'd saved, and I always saved what I could. He said he doesn't have a lot of expensive habits, doesn't have sports cars, doesn't buy expensive clothing. His biggest luxury, he says, is eating breakfast every morning at the Square 109 Cafe in Clinton, Missouri. Says it's the same place he took Hardin out to eat for breakfast. He says, I wouldn't say I've lived a frugal life. He says, I've made money, I've invested it, and I've spent it. He said, all my life, if I tried something that didn't make money, I'd just move on to something else. But he decided that he wanted to make this donation because he's always admired the volunteer firefighters. He says, I've been thinking about this a long time, and I knew at this point in my life I could help. He says it's important to have a good fire department, especially with all the grass that we have around here. So with that $500,000 donation, Hardin says that they're going to be able to purchase a new tanker pumper, as well as 2 used fire trucks. They're going to be able to buy new protective gear for every firefighter in Calhoun. They've been working with 40-year-old equipment at this point. Hardin says the gear alone is going to cost about $139,000, but he says Sam wants us to get the works. New boots, helmets, pants, gloves, everything from head to toe. He said when all is said and done, we'll just about have that $500,000 spent, but that's what Sam wanted. And that's what we're going to do. So, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do everything he can to help the community that he calls home, 91-year-old Sam Sloan in Calhoun, Missouri. We thank you, sir, for your very, very good deed. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. I'm looking forward to seeing you back here again tomorrow. Chuck Michelle is going to be with us from the California Rifle and Pistol Association and the Second Amendment Law Center. We're going to be talking once again about the cases that are going to be heard in conference in the Supreme Court on Thursday, but there is also a lot of California-specific litigation to discuss as well, so be sure to tune in for that tomorrow. And be sure to check out BearingArms.com throughout the day. We're keeping you up to date on all of the latest Second Amendment news and information from all across the nation. And if you like what you see, I would encourage you to become a VIP or VIP Gold member. Just go to BearingArms.com/subscribe. Use the promo code SAVEAMERICA, and you can get a 50% discount on your VIP or VIP Gold membership. You'll get exclusive content, an ad-free experience. You'll be able to comment on all of our stories. If you're a VIP Gold member, you'll have even more exclusive content to delve into. It's a great, great way to show your support for the Second Amendment and the independent pro-Second Amendment journalism we're doing at Bearing Arms. And again, I thank you for your support. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.